What's going on, y'all? I've got a 500i on the bench today. Clutch grenaded on it, and while we're here, you know, the old cinch was, there's a few other parts that took some damage off of this. And we're just going to service the whole thing in general. This is about a 3-year-old saw, commercial use. So sit tight and let me take you through all the things to look for if you've got a 3 or 4-year-old 500i. Okay, the saw came to me and there was no needle bearing underneath here. So when I pulled the clutch off, it's missing 2 of these clips. This one's bent up pretty bad, and this quite possibly could be repaired, but it's got enough wear on it on the Spider right here that they're just going to get a new one. However, that clutch is a little pricey at $59. So we're going to try and save the customer a little bit of money. This runs the same clutch drum as the 440, 460s. So in Oregon, 38, 470, I think the X is not necessary when you look it up. But typically you can pick up this kit, which is the drum, a brand new rim sprocket, the washer, and the E-clip for about half the cost of what you're going to pay for it from steel. Because we've got a list of things that are going on here. The other reason why we replaced the drum is that on the inside of this, you won't be able to see it. I don't know, maybe you can when I take you in close. But that's all boogered up. You see how rough and textured, and it feels that way on the inside too. I mean, maybe we could polish this up, and it's got a fair amount of wear. So your clutch rides right there, and the outside of this has got like a little bit of a dish to it as well. So, you know, it's just time. I mean, you know, this saw was built in, here, let me back you out a little bit. I think this was, let's see if we can see. So right there, manufacture date was 08 of 20. It's time, you know, and this is time for wear parts. You know, the other thing I thought, you know, while I'm here, let me just service it. There was gas weeping around the tank right here, and you know, I don't know if you really get how disgusting that is. Anyway, so I thought, okay, let's do a fuel filter, a new cap. And when I pulled it off, it looked like some muddy swamp in there. So I let it settle, the gas that was in there. Let's see if I can get you up to the light. I mean, it was just, that's just mud. But you have to be mindful every time you pull this cap. I don't care if it's steel cap or a Husky cap or a Deco cap, a few crumbs fall in. You know, the job site's dirty, yada, yada, yada. When I pulled this off just to check to see how the starter components work, because it's got some age on it, you can see this stuff's packed in there. That's after compressed air. So this whole dish right here was just slapped full of really small fines. And we'll just call that airborne sandpaper. So even though this spool doesn't look bad, it's got, take you in nice and tight, enough play back and forth right here where that airborne sandpaper has hogged this thing out. The biggest problem, even though at some point in time these starter pawls were replaced, the clip had it and they were hanging, you know, they were in there kicked off to the side. And I'm like, you know what, if I turn this saw loose all fresh as a daisy with all these parts on here, this spool's gonna let go and then grenade everything else. So I'm gonna get this cleaned up a little bit better. I've got a fresh rope rotor to go in there, and you'll see how much nicer that fits. I mean, there's no play there at all. The needle bearing was gone. We got a new needle bearing in there. What else are we looking at? It also rode up and chewed on this housing. Some customer told me just go ahead and replace it. You know, the chip guard right there is all chewed up. I mean, you really got the good out of that one. So we've got a new one. I transferred the dog over. The glides are in there. What else have we got? This oil pump, when the clutch grenaded, got dinged up pretty bad. I've seen worse, but I didn't catch it at first. It was really dirty. But right there, the shaft, here, let me back you out just a little bit. The shaft right here was dented. So this does not move freely. The worm gear was all chewed up on it as well. That I can't fix. You know, oil pumps don't go bad necessarily, but that kind of damage, we had to throw one of those in there as well. You know, this is going to be a pretty expensive maintenance thing for a clutch, but you know, I'm just trying to be holistic about everything I do here. This brake band, you know, is life-saving safety shit, so there's enough wear on it. It got a new one as well. Before we finish up, you know, I think some companies, let me back up just a little bit. I got to tell you one story before I tell you another. There's a local chemical company here in town, and they formulate their own stuff. Some of it's knockoffs of other products. Some of them are original products to them. This has been one of my go-to degreasers for years. It's cheap. It works really good. It doesn't react with aluminum. It's safe for aluminum. So, you know, equate this to something like Simple Green, okay? And it's been dirt cheap for years. The company sold to another local individual a year and a half, maybe 2 years ago. And at the time I could buy this for $6 a gallon. New owners, you know, did a little something with the front of the shop and everything. And now next time I went back, you know, it's $7, and then it's $8, and then it's, every time I went to go get some degreaser, it's going up and up and up. I went in there yesterday, and this bottle was $12.50 plus tax, so with 6% sales tax, that's $13.25. We're over double. Now, the original owner that I became friends with he said, we make this stuff dirt cheap. I guarantee you this bottle costs way more than the product that's in it. I think some companies or some people have got the mindset that they can charge more because we've all been conditioned to accept, oh, you know, the shortages and the increases and inflation and all this. I'm pretty sure his costs hadn't doubled. Anyway, enough about that. Let's get back to talking about chainsaws and shit. Okay, I just got this back in there, and you can see that this works just like it's supposed to. As you pull out, those go. Before, these things were canted, you know, out like this. It wouldn't have been long before somebody yanked on this, and all this would have broken apart and tore all this up. So, you know, we're just doing preventative maintenance right here. Speaking of preventative maintenance, Lordy, I don't know if you can really see here. Let's get this off, and I think we better take a look at this. See how the filter's doing. There's a little bit in there, not horrible, but we're going to use some compressed air. You know, it's funny, still says, oh, you never use compressed air on this, and don't ever do this, that, and the other thing. Just buy you a new one. These are like 40 bucks. I'm actually going to degrease this, hose it out, and then clean it with some compressed air. Just because, you know, knocking it out or hitting it with some compressed air is not enough when they're this dirty or they got this much use on them. You have to think of your engine as a shop vac. Because what happens is once this media gets full, that same suction is going in there, and what it's trying to do is pull the smallest particles through the filter into the engine. And your engine does not like grit on the inside at 14,000 RPM. Okay, I got the filter all cleaned up. One of the things you'll notice on these new white filters, this is some kind of poly filter material. It's not cloth or anything like that or felt, but it doesn't come back clean. I've even just for the hell of it tried some Clorox cleanup, and this stuff's, I guess, porous enough where it just gets stained and that stain won't come out of the material. Regardless, it flows nice and clean. You can put it up to your mouth and blow through here, and there's very little restriction. You don't have to do that every time, but you know, obviously we're going to throw a spark plug at it. This is the original spark plug from this, and you see all the gook. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to shoot some brake clean in here and flush that out with some compressed air to make sure that I've got good contact and I get all that gook out of here, because I mean, that's, you can't be making a good signal with all that. Where we at? With all that on there interfering with good contact. And I think we might be done with servicing this for a busted clutch, which brings me to another point. I know more want to see this saw back in a week or two because something I missed or something else let go. You follow me? And the customer no more wants to come back and say, man, you just had this thing. So I always try to be as thorough as possible when I'm working on this. You know, it's just in for a clutch. I could have just thrown a clutch and a few broken parts on it and sent it out the door. But, you know, as we look at these, you know, the neglect of everything else, it's certainly worth the extra time. And, you know, regardless of a steep repair bill, you know, at least I know this thing's going to go out in the field and it's going to work day in and day out, and he's not going to have any problems, and I'm not going to hear about it. And I think that's why I get a lot of the business that I do, is that because I'm taking those extra steps. You know, you take this to the dealer, they're going to slap that stuff back on there. They may have put a new filter and a new spark plug in this. Who knows? You know, that's just kind of standard protocol. Do they really flush the tank out? Because if you guys don't do this for a living, then you really don't know. You can dump the fuel out of here. You know, you can swish it around and dump. But when you look in there after you've dumped the fuel, there's still a bunch of trash in there. And I use compressed air and then blow, you know, turn it up on its side and then blow and make sure that all that's out. So when you put a brand new fuel filter in here, it's not working overtime on that first tank of gas. All right, let's see if we can get a shot of the piston here, because I had to take a look. Looks pretty good. There's a little bit of discoloration. I'm really having a tough time getting proper lighting on this. I mean, it's one of the more difficult pictures, especially with having this baffle around it. But anyway, I mean, you get it. Piston looks good, and the reason why I wanted to look at the piston was because this is the spark plug that came out of here. You don't think she's been running a little hot, do you? This is most likely from the fuel starvation from the old clogged up fuel filter. All right, that about wraps up our holistic service of this 500i. I hope you learned something today. These are just regular wear parts. They just all seem to come on the same service cycle, but some of this stuff probably should have been done sooner than later. Regardless, I took it outside. It runs, revs, idles, does everything it's supposed to do. It was a running saw when it came here. Hopefully it runs a little bit better now. Anyway, thanks for sticking around to the end, and I will see you on the next one.